Hello there, and welcome to On the Case. And today I'm on the case of Donald Trump trying to silence social media because he doesn't like it. He doesn't like them hiding his posts when he is basically glorifying violence. In the case today was, sending the troops in to shoot people. But he's also created an executive order to restrict the ability of Twitter to fact check him. He lost his temper about that yesterday. But the thing to bear in mind is that he is a branch of the government. So the whole First Amendment stuff comes in here. So I'm going to play this bit of video from C-SPAN that was posted earlier today, and I'll play it through. I've got to mute myself because otherwise it echoes, and because I don't use headphones. So so let's swap this over. And
the choices that Twitter makes when it chooses to suppress, edit, blacklist, shadow, ban are editorial decisions, pure and simple. They're editorial decisions. In those moments, Twitter ceases to be a neutral public platform and they become an editor with a viewpoint. And I think we can say that about others also, whether you're looking at Google, whether you're looking at Facebook, and perhaps others.
now think about what he just said. Just let me move my microphone, that's better. So think about what he just said. So he referred to them like they're editors. Well, if they're editors, then that becomes a part of the free press. So he can't stifle them as a branch of the government. But we'll listen to him continue.
One egregious example is when they try to silence views that they disagree with by selectively applying a fact check.
Okay, so he posts lies frequently, half-truths, alternative facts, and they haven't done this until this week. So he's basically complaining that his ability to lie on Twitter is being limited.
FACT, fact check. What they choose to fact check and what they choose to ignore or even promote is nothing more than a political activism group or political activism, and it's inappropriate. You look at what's happened, you look at where they're going, where they're coming from. I think you all see it yourselves. This censorship and bias is a threat to freedom itself. Imagine if your phone company silenced or edited your conversation. Social media companies have vastly more power and more reach than any phone company in the United States, more reach actually than your newspapers by far, more reach than a lot of your traditional forms of communication. Therefore, today I'm signing an executive order to protect and uphold the free speech and rights of the American people. Currently, social media...
Did you hear that? For the American people. He thinks of himself as the American people. No, he's a part of the US government. He is one of the three branches. The presidency is a part of the government process. The fact that he's writing an executive order is evidence of that. That he can do that is a perfect illustration of what he's complaining about.
Giants like Twitter receive an unprecedented liability shield based on the theory that they're a neutral platform, which they are not an editor with a viewpoint. My executive order calls for new regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to make it that social media companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield. That's a big...
Now, think about how many times Donald Trump has said fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. Well, if they decided to not broadcast what he said, he'd accuse them of limiting his speech out to the American public. And yet, here he is trying to say that, you know, they're not allowed to limit someone's speech. Well, you know, he doesn't get to make that choice because it is a private company. Twitter is a private company. Facebook are private companies. They don't owe you or me anything. They let us use their their system, and they have terms of service. And if you break those terms of service, then you get, you know, restricted or even banned. And of course, now we're in a year where politics in America is really important due to the fact that, you know, there's an election at the end of the year. So, you know, he's effectively trying to say, how dare they restrict me? Because he's not trying to protect anybody else. You know, do you think that he's going to protect, you know, some New York Times or Washington Post journalist who uses Twitter? Do you think he's going to complain that they're fake news and they're lying? Of course he is. That's what he does. That's what he always does, day to day. So, you know, like I say, he's arguing against his own position here.
Big deal. They have a shield. They can do what they want. They have a shield. They're not going to have that shield. My executive order further instructs the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, to prohibit social media companies from engaging in any deceptive acts or practices affecting commerce. This authority resides in Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. I think you know it pretty well. Most of you know it very well. I would think you know it quite well, right? Additionally, I'm directing the Attorney General to work cooperatively with the states. He's going to be working very much and very closely in cooperation with the states to enforce their own laws against such deceptive business practices. The states have broad and powerful authority to regulate in this arena, and they'll be doing it also, and we encourage them to do it if they see exactly as we've been seeing. It's what they're doing is tantamount to monopoly, you can say. It's tantamount to taking over the airwaves. Can't let it happen. Otherwise, we're not going to have a democracy. We're not going to have anything to do with a republic. Finally, I'm directing my administration to develop policies and procedures to ensure taxpayer dollars are not going in any social media company that repress free speech. The government spends billions of dollars on giving them money. They're rich enough, so we're going to be doing none of it or very little of it. As
Hang on. I've suddenly forgotten how to. There we go. Okay. So it's an interesting thing that he's trying to do here because, you know, as I said, he's trying to he's trying to limit the ability of Twitter to say, sorry, that breaks our terms of service. Well, as I said before, Twitter is a public company. You know, they're a private company. Sorry. You know, they offer a service, and they can decide who uses it and who doesn't. And you know, that would include something like, let's say, the Ku Klux Klan. You know, under his thing, he would say, no, they're not allowed to stop them from doing that. How about let's take it an opposite way. Let's say Muslim extremists that are threatening to bomb America. They, as far from Trump's point of view here, they would be perfectly within their rights to put anything on Twitter they want. Anything they want. And, you know, you can't stop them. That's where he's going with this. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There's another element worth considering here, and that is how I'm going to read something from a website called The Balance. Are corporations people? This came from 2019. How corporations use the Constitution to expand their economic power. So it's by Emily Amadio. Let me stick that in the. I think that's gone in there. Okay, so since 1976, corporations have been expanding their rights. They become entities whose rights are protected by the U.S. Constitution. That gives them a legal status like that of U.S. citizens. So if Twitter is one of those, then they have the right to free speech, and they have the right to not have their activities, not have their ability to say, remove it, or to say that this here, here's a fact check from the claim here, because that's not true. So as a result, they've increased their political and economic power, the constitutional rights of corporations. In various cases, the Supreme Court has granted corporations some of the same constitutional rights as citizens. Explicitly, they're protected by the First, Fifth, and 14th Amendments. The First Amendment protects religious freedom, the right to free speech, and the right to peacefully assemble peacefully. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment or religion, or prohibiting the free speech thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech of the press, or of the right of people to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Excuse me about this loud motorbike. On January the 21st, 2010, the Supreme Court gave free speech to corporations and unions, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, allowed organisations to fund ads that explicitly endorsed or opposed a candidate. The decision was overturned on Section 203 of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002. The McCain-Feingold Act said corporations should not have any influence on politics. The act was named after Senators John McCain, a Republican of Arizona, and Russ Feingold, Democrat. What's WY? Is that Wisconsin? Or is that Washington? I think that's Wisconsin. The court said the act restricted corporations' rights under the First Amendment. Justice Anthony M. Kennedy ruled, corporations and other associations, like individuals, contribute to the discussion, debate, and dissemination of information and ideas that the First Amendment seeks to foster. The court added that speech is a requirement of democracy. As a result, the First Amendment forbids discrimination of any kind, any class of speaker. In 2014, the court extended First Amendment protection to corporations' religious freedom. It said that companies could disobey a law that violated their owners' religious beliefs. In Burwell versus Hobby Lobby Stores Incorporated, the court upheld Hobby Lobby's religious freedom. The company did not have to include contraception coverage in its health plans. The court said the Affordable Care Act violated the firm's rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The court said that the corporations had the same rights under the 14th Amendment as people did. The 14th Amendment protects citizens from state actions. It also affords citizens equal protection. The state cannot discriminate against anyone or its enforcement in the law. This is part of the 14th. No state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive the person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within the jurisdiction of equal protections under the laws. Protection of the laws, sorry. The Fifth Amendment protects corporations from government actions to nationalise their property, and then it's nor be deprived of life, liberty, property without due process of law. Now shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And this is a little bit about what Trump is talking about here, because if he's going to say, that they're not allowed to do something, if their rights to decide that they're going to fact check something are restricted, well, they're now saying that no, the government's authority exceeds the private company, the corporation, and with Twitter being a corporation, then that Fifth Amendment right protects them. Doesn't matter what Trump does with his, butthurt executive order, because that's all it comes down to. He's butthurt. He's upset that that they've restricted his lies, because that's all it comes down to. By having effectively a disclaimer with a fact-checking disclaimer, that limits his ability to lie, and that's what he's trying to protect. He's not trying to protect everybody else. He's not protecting you or me or anybody else on Twitter. He's only trying to protect himself. He's not even trying to protect the government. Because think about how many times that people will, attack some, a Democratic senator with lies. Or for that matter, a Republican one with lies. Because both sides do similar things. So, yeah. And so, as a part of this article, it gives the evolution of corporations as people. Corporations acquired many of their rights through the historically of campaign financing. This battle pitted Congress against the Supreme Court. Congress wanted to restrict large corporate donations, while the court increasingly allowed them. In 1907 to 1970, Congress limited campaign spending of corporations, unions, and federal employees. 1971, the Federal Elections Campaign Act required politicians to report their contributions. It limited how much an individual or group could donate. It created the Federal Election Commission. In 1976, let me just take a drink. It's warm here today. In 1976, the Supreme Court said limiting campaign regulations was against the Constitution. In Buckley versus Vallejo, the court ruled that such limitations were a violation of free speech. It allowed unlimited funding for political commercials. It considered advertising to be a form of free speech. In 1978, the First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, the court reaffirmed that corporations have the right to free speech, just as individuals did. It said the bank could spend money on state ballot initiative. It did not grant them the right to support specific candidates. 2000, the presidential race saw $450 million in so-called soft money. Individuals, corporations, and labor unions could donate as much as they wanted to either major party. More than 60% of income came from organizations. 2002, the Congress enacted the McCain-Feingold Act. It banned organizations from financing issue-based advertising on belief of candidates. It also banned soft money. Instead, wealthy donors have to give it to shadow parties. These political action committees supported a political agenda. In doing so, they supported a candidate that represented their views, but they were independent of the two parties. 2007, Supreme Court allowed issue-based advertising if it did not endorse or oppose a candidate. 2008, Citizens United spent $1 million on ads criticizing presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. It violated the 2000 Finance Reform Act. Citizens United sued, taking the case to the Supreme Court. 2010, the Citizens United versus the FEC, the court ruled that the McCain-Feingold Act violated the constitutional First Amendment. 2010, Congress defeated a bill that would make political donors reveal their identities. As a result, so-called dark money influences national and many local campaigns. So, effectively, what I'm trying to say with all this is that since Twitter is a corporation, they have the right to put these fact-check things. And if a Democrat, because we know how polarized the American political system is now, if a Democrat did the same thing, if they put, you know, if they put a disclaimer, fact check under it, then they can do that too. It has to swing both ways. That's the most important part. That, you know, in all levels of fairness, they really shouldn't only target one party rather than both. They all need to be positioned, given the same amount of freedom to express, but also the freedom to, but also the responsibility to have their claims assessed. So, you know, and there's under that C-SPAN thing, there's a whole bunch of parts, you know, a bunch of tweets based upon it, and it's free speech is all well and well, but there should be restrictions against bullying people and threatening to harm them. My friend went through this. It must be stopped like yesterday. Why don't you sign a bill that protects people? Someone replied, he doesn't care about protecting people. Someone else, Helena, within a day, Donald Trump is issuing executive orders to force social media companies to allow him to lie without fact-checking. It's been 5 months now. 10,000 Americans have died, and there's no national strategy to respond to the pandemic. Someone put correction. I'm signing an executive order so I, the Supreme Leader, may do anything I say to do, anything I wish, with no consequences. Feel my wrath, peasants. You should read it. I'm signing an executive order because I'm the biggest crybaby. I bullied and lied my whole life, and time as president is running out, so I wanted to leave one more bad mark in my presidency. You know, I'm a malignant narcissist. I need to have it my own way. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of them, but really it comes down to that Trump doesn't have any power over Twitter. If he violates the company's terms of service, then his account should be suspended or deleted like anybody else's. You know, if I say something, you know, specifically egregious, I might get, you know, Twitter banned for a week or something like that. But, you know, there are people that get their accounts slammed all the time. I have been on the end of someone being particularly hateful because I'm trans. I reported it to Twitter, their account disappeared. Because what I did, as well as that one, I showed about, you know, a bunch of other tweets that, you know, had the same kind of thing. So, you know, they went and created another one almost straight away, because some people do this. But, you know, effectively, Twitter fact-checked him for using their platform for a political purpose. And he was lying. So they fact-checked it. And that's what it comes down to. He doesn't want to expect the responsibility of telling the truth. Or the responsibility of, when you tell a lie, people point out you're lying. And that can include the system that you're platforming on. Now there's two options for you, Donnie. Two options. You can either accept that because that's their terms of service now, or bye-bye. Go and use some other, you know, system. You might actually be better off, because one of the problems that you get is when you start off the day on Twitter berating somebody for something or other, and that brings you flack. Well, perhaps some of the early morning flack that comes your way could be limited if you stopped using Twitter. But that's about it, really. It's a very short video, and I thought it was an interesting one. I'm going to make another one in a couple of minutes because there's more Stephen Craig shit coming on. So thanks very much for watching, and enjoy your day.